and this is, and unfortunately, and we have a country of a bunch of stupid people, stupid and uninformed. Okay, we have a country of stupid, uninformed people.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is Kevin.
That is my
That's
opinion.
his
That is
opinion.
my opinion.
I am
100%.
not calling you stupid, America.
I am owning this. I think, look, if you go watch the what was it? Was it the Daily Show that did it? I forgot who did it, but they offered people a chocolate bar or a 10-ounce bar of silver. Okay, and people took the chocolate bar. Right, okay. Right. Okay, you go ask people, questions about this country, they're clueless.
I agree.
Okay, so yeah, we've brought a bunch of stupid folks up in this country. We got a bunch of
Kevin, these people voted because they saw. Listen, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016 because at the time I didn't have a son, but I had 2 daughters. I couldn't vote for Trump because of his character.
Right.
But then I looked at how he governed and the work that he did, and I voted for him the second time.
I couldn't do it. And I'll tell you why I couldn't do it. The reason why I couldn't do it is because the stuff that he was getting away with, in my opinion.
Like what would be an example of something he was getting away with?
Things that he says, things that he does, lies that you tell. Not saying that politicians don't lie. not saying that. But the falsehoods and the false narratives and things that you put out, I can't follow a person. That's just me. I cannot follow a person like that. So
I saw the complete opposite. I saw somebody who was completely flawed, and I saw he was being spied on by the Obama administration.
I'm not saying they weren't, but there's one thing to be flawed. You and I are flawed, okay? But it's another thing to be flawed and think that you're flawless.
Yeah, again, and that goes back to his character. No, he was. Listen, he was. I listen. I hope he doesn't run in 2024 because I'm just ready to move on. However, I became sympathetic of him because of the attacks levied against him, all of which turned out to be false attacks.
But there's no different that if you want to talk about attacks, you go back the 2 terms before with Obama when he got elected the first time, and you got folks in the House of Representatives and the Senate saying it's our job to make sure he's a 1-term president. We're not going to pass anything. We're going to hold everything.
That's the job of every opposing party. There's nothing unique about that.
But once again, pawns in a game. There's nothing that's coming out of that that's benefiting the American people.
But Benghazi was a real scandal. Fast and Furious was a real scandal. The weaponization of the IRS was a real scandal. Those things were actually laid at the feet of the Obama administration, but he had cover from the mainstream media and, as Kwame likes to say, his white zaddies that were basically propping him up.
Absolutely. He has some white folks that propped him up. You don't go from making a speech at a national convention to president. That doesn't normally happen.
Right.
Okay. You were the quote unquote chosen one.
But still, Kevin, did you honestly believe in your lifetime you would have lived long enough to see a Black president?
No.
So here's my point. That took a lot of white people voting for a Black man to be president.
But that took a lot of manipulation by the media as well that we talked about.
That's fine, but still, this is where I go back to white guilt. People were able to virtue signal and say, I'm going to vote for a Black man to show my grandchildren that grandma or grandpa voted for the Black president. Historic.
Or is it this Republican candidate really sucks? Okay,
there's definitely a little bit of that too.
And can't compete.
But McCain and Romney, neither one of them sucked worse than Barack Obama.
That's Trey's opinion. That's Trey's. Okay.
All right, so hold on. So so we talked about the institutions. You brought up the very first thing you brought up was phonics. Okay, my wife and I, we homeschool our children, and we use a curriculum called Spell to Write and Read. And basically, the simple premise of it is this: you can be a bad speller but a good reader.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a great speller, you're going to be a good reader.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't actually sit down and teach them to read the way we get taught in school, which is typically by sight words.
Right.
And I heard this from John McWhorter. You familiar with Dr. John McWhorter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's for the listeners out there, and if they're not familiar with him, look him up. He's a Columbia PhD. He's a linguist at Columbia University, a Black man himself. And this was one of the first real educational reform ideas that I knew didn't require money. It shouldn't require politics. And from an educational perspective, it just makes sense, right? In Louisiana, 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade are what we take is called LEAP. And so if kids don't pass the LEAP exam, the Louisiana Exit and Assessment Program or something like that, if they don't pass LEAP, they don't go to the 5th, to the 9th, and graduate, okay? And what they know is that they don't pass LEAP in 4th grade, they get held back and have to repeat the 4th grade. Well, now you just put a kid who's hopefully going to be 18 when he graduates, now you just put him out to be 19. And then if he gets into middle school because he's struggling in elementary and he fails, let's say 7th grade, now he's 2 years behind. So now here he goes into, and now you're looking at 16, which in Louisiana, you can drop out of school when you're 16. But the likelihood of this kid failing twice or being held back 2 grades throughout his career and then finishing high school at 20 years old, it's just statistically not going to happen, okay? So McWhorter says that pretty much if you're not on grade level by the 3rd grade in terms of reading, you're I forget the statistics. He gave a speech and I don't have it to my memory at this moment, but he says, statistically speaking, you're exponentially less likely to graduate from high school, which we know graduating from high school is one of the key components to making sure that you never live a life of poverty. The other one is one day get married and then have kids. And the third one is work a job, even if it's part-time.
Right.
And always have a job, and then avoid the criminal justice system. Don't get an arrest record or a felony a charge. So that's a progressive and a conservative studies have bared out that these are the 4 things that pretty much guarantee someone stays out of poverty. And if 2 people do it, and they marry, 2 poor people make a middle class family, of which case they escape poverty as well, just through the institution of marriage.
But here's my question real quick. I have a quick question. On the institution of marriage, when you have 50% of marriages ended in divorce, that to me, that doesn't, sit well for the benefit of the institution of marriage.
So that's a statistic that's somewhat questionable. It's oftentimes repeated. I've yet to see an actual study that bears that out. What I have seen from people like the Barna Group, which is a Christian research organization, that actually the divorce rate inside of the church is like 30% compared to a more is like 70% number in the general culture, right? So there's somewhat of a conservative component if you want to look at religiosity as a conservative trait as opposed to a secular trait. But the point being is that oftentimes the argument is made that we have extreme poverty for certain people in the country. Why? Because of racism. Well, if simply the institution of marriage and the avoidance of the big 4 or the adherence to the big 4, 2 people who are both only making $20,000 a year come together in marriage without children, they become a family of $40,000. And although that still ain't living high on the hog, you are now considered middle class and now start having children, you're going to progress in society. You're not going to be stuck in generational poverty is the point. So all of those things being said, this is the thing that if you have kids who are mean tested, which we know it's easy for mean tested, Kwame's doing it right now with the shoes. Kids who are on free or reduced lunch, even if the parents are lying, because the local school district has they don't have to like verify that that's mama's income.
Right.
So you get that with the Title VIII money or whatever, Title IX money. And you look at the free and reduced lunch, and if those kids qualify for that, you put them on a phonics based starting in 1st grade, a phonics-based regimen of learning how to read. And if you can get kids by third grade, and by the way, this is the most natural thing. We're on our third child. He'll be starting this program in about a year and a half, 2 years. For both of my girls, it just naturally happened because this was the elders' way of teaching kids how to read, their children how to read, which was A, E, I, B. It was
I
teaching
did
those
the whole
sounds.
phonics thing. I did the whole phonics
Yeah.
thing. I did it
So
with
that to
I
me,
bought hooked on phonics for my child, you know, because like you said, that's the way that I was raised. Phonics worked for me.
absolutely.
But I think part of the problem is
And if kids can read, they're going to be able to do math. And if kids can do read, if they can read and they can do math, they're not going to fall behind academically. And there's a chance that they graduate in higher
on time.
percentages, even from bad schools.
Okay. But I think part of the problem is what we talked about before. We talked about resources. You have
This is why the phonics method works better because you don't have to go home and have magazines and books on shelves and you don't have to
I
have those
understand that.
resources.
But if I have a school that's out in the suburbs where these kids in first grade, kindergarten, second grade, fourth grade, whatever, prior to them being tested, have like tablets in the school. But this inner city school, we don't have tablets. We've got these old textbooks. I mean, I don't know about when you were in the classroom, but I remember being in the classroom and there was a textbook that I had when I was in high school. And I'm like, things have changed. You
Well,
know,
you know what you talk about the haves and have-nots. You know what the really wealthy are doing right now with their education for their kids?
other than
Zero
trying to,
technology schools.
right, or they don't, or they don't even give their kids tablets and stuff like that. Like
Yeah,
it was
Jobs.
right,
Steve Jobs never gave his kids iPhones and tablets because they're too addictive.
right. It's like my daughter she'll be 16 on Saturday. Okay. And she was either going to seventh grade or eighth grade, and it was a big to-do around here because she wanted a cell phone. Okay. She always played with her mom's cell phone or whatever. She wanted a cell phone. And I was like, no. I was like, first of all, who you calling?
Right.
Okay. It's not like you're away from me and your mom, or you're, and you need somebody to come pick you up from somewhere. So you need to call somebody. Wherever you're going, somebody's there with you. And whoever that adult is that's there with you has a phone. Okay. So if you need to call us, you need to worry about memorizing my phone number as opposed to having a phone. Okay. Right. So she got a phone, but she didn't get it to her freshman year of high school. Okay. Now I know you're going to be at, football games, need somebody to pick you up, basketball game, whatever. And of course we had the pandemic and then, everybody's at home, but none of that happened. But my thing was, you don't need a phone.
Right.
What do you need a phone for? Okay.
Right.
First of all, you're not paying the bill. You don't have a job. Okay. You can't afford the bill. So what you're doing is creating another bill for me.
I agree.
Okay. And I mean, I come from the generation where we didn't have participation trophies. Okay. We had, you would go try, like you talked about playing basketball, you go try for a basketball team, and the coach would be like, everybody step outside, write the names on a sheet of paper and post it on the wall. These are the guys that come back tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
And then the rest of y'all go home and work on your game or whatever. That's how it was. And it didn't make a difference whether it was 20 kids in the gym or 100 kids in the gym. This is the list. Okay. This is the list. The rest of y'all go home. So
that was the good old days, Kevin. I'm serious. I remember that. I mean, I know we're 10 years apart, but like that's my upbringing as well. I mean, that's
right. I mean, my mother was a teacher. So, being at home, we had certain resources that maybe other kids didn't have. Sure. But as a teacher, one of my closest friends used to be my next door neighbor. I've known him since I was 7, something like that. Okay. He said to me, only thing I wish is that I wish I would have taken advantage of your mama more. Because I had a teacher living right next door to me.
What kind of teacher was she?
Math and business.
Gotcha.
Math and business. Yeah. And so Math was never an issue for her boys, and those kinds of things. But like you said, my day when I was a kid,
Is
my
she still
day,
with us, by the way?
yes, she is. Yep.
Good.
Yep. Should be 77 August 2nd.
Awesome.
Yeah, but that'll be 80 in 2 weeks. But my day would, I think I was like 6 and I was a latchkey kid. Okay, my dad worked nights. My mom was a teacher. She would get home probably about an hour after I got home from school. But we lived in a duplex. So if I had any issues or whatever, I just go next door to my neighbors. Their son was at the same age as I was. So, for the time he and I were 2 years old, we're going to school together. So, but we would come home, drop the books or whatever. There would be something in the fridge waiting for me to eat or fix myself a sandwich. And I go stretch out across my parents' bed, and it was Sesame Street, Electric Company, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Okay, so I was getting, some ABC stuff. I was getting some stuff like you were talking about with sight words and phonics with the Electric Company, and then with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I was learning how to be a good neighbor.
Right.
So I had those things. Well, when my daughter was born, I was able to get a lot of those things on DVD. And so I ripped the DVDs to MP4, put it on an external hard drive, and attached the external hard drive to my television. So for years, my daughter didn't know what a damn commercial
was. Right.
Because, you'd watch Leapfrog, you'd watch, Sesame Street, you'd watch Electric Company. She became a big fan of Neo, watching the Electric Company because he was on there all the time.
That's good.
But that's, how our day was. Our day was when she got home from school was go home, start your homework. You don't need a break. You're still in school mode. Okay. While you're still in school mode, go ahead and knock it out. Now, once you handle your business, you have time to do whatever it is that you want to do in the evening, or we can go do something or something like, because your homework is complete. And I remember a parent saying to me, "Oh, you got it easy." It's like, no, I don't have it easy. We've put in a lot of work, to get this structure in place. Because the kids were on some conference call one Friday night, and my daughter was like, "Look, y'all, I gotta go. Let's wrap this up because I gotta get to my homework." Because my thing is, if you do your homework on Friday, you ain't gotta worry about it on Saturday and Sunday. Struggling and trying
weekend to yourself.
Right, you have your weekend to yourself.
I got a 15-year-old. I'm trying to convince her of that.
Okay. So my thing is, handle your business. Handle your business. Handle your business. Handle your business. And like I was saying earlier, and we mentioned this in the very beginning, these kids need to come out of high school with a high school diploma in one hand, a trade certification or an IT certification, or they can have both in the other hand. Okay.
We use a homeschool curriculum right now that in the junior year, you can do a dual enrollment program so that the last 2 years of high school, everything gets graded and everything gets instructed by a college professor. So she'll graduate with her high school diploma from the state of Louisiana and an associate's degree. So she's a gymnast. So we're hopeful that she goes right from high school into competitive gymnastics at some university, hopefully in the SEC, hopefully LSU. I'd be okay with Florida, maybe Alabama.
She can't go to Mississippi State. So I was asking about, Ole Miss or Mississippi State.
No. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with, she can go to Centenary. I don't care where she goes, as long as they're covering the cost of school, I'm good with.
Okay. Have you used, real quick, have you used raise.me?
Maybe.
Check that website out. It's for money for school based on grade.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. So, we're hopeful that she finishes high school and she's got some options. You know what I'm saying? She can, if she wanted to, she could take a year to find herself. Who knows? Maybe she gets a little dose of spirituality and ownership of her spiritual, and wants to do some kind of mission work for a year or something. but at least she's not behind educationally. She's got a little bit of a foundation there. So yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that we can do nowadays individually with our families. I'm trying to think of McWhorter has 3 or 4. The phonics one is one of those things, but there's I know I think one of the obvious ones is like we've got to get rid of we all have to, I think, work to get rid of the war on drugs. I'm not supportive of obviously of
It's a waste
legalizing
of money.
heroin, but
It's a
yeah,
waste of money. It's a waste of money, and its intention was based in racism and hatred.
well, with McWhorter, to McWhorter's point, what he talks about is the biggest proponent of the war on drugs during the Nixon administration was the Congressional Black Caucus.
Mm-hmm.
Congressional Black Caucus wanted the Republican administration under Nixon to necessarily get the opioids out of their communities. And if he didn't take massive action, they were going to go before the American people and label him as the racist that he was made out to be anyway.
Well, right.
So McWhorter makes the point that it wasn't necessarily racistly intended as much as it was racially influenced, and it was wanted by Black leadership at the time that it was started. He makes that point in that same talk. I forget what the third thing is just off the top of my head, but it was phonics for means tested kids. It was maybe vouchers are in there. I don't remember. But my hope was I could encourage Kwame to go look and just right now he seems to be in a place of being open to hearing from what he calls elders, people older than him, giving him information. You know, I'm just trying to capitalize. Like he said, I'm trying to get some of this mama's cooking. I don't have a real active channel. So I was hoping to put Kwame in there. And look, I'm super grateful, man, to be able to have even this conversation with you. Hopefully people listen to it. They can glean some things. You know, they can see some things. They can hear some truth. Because I think there's things that apply to you and that apply to me. I think those things are super important that people can see that it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter the racial makeup of what's going to work and what's not going to work. If you go look at that thread, in on that video, you'll see sort of a Black separatist way of looking at things, and it feels racist.
Well, there are there are Black people who believe that there's nothing that white America or white people globally can do to help assist, contribute in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I'm not one of those people. And I think that part of that, you know, I think that one of the things that hinders Americans is lack of travel. And when you travel around the world and you meet people from around the world and you see how other people live and those kinds of things, like you talked about how, you know, as a white person, you don't think about your whiteness when you wake up. But if you were living in Nigeria, you might.
Yeah, when I went to Uganda a couple years ago, and I went to the Bidi Bidi refugee camp in northern Uganda, which was housing pretty much all of the South Sudanese refugees that were leaving from the civil war that was going on in South Sudan, right? And first of all, I was unaccustomed, you know, coming from New Orleans, going to a HBCU. I'm not uncomfortable in a room that doesn't look like me. But what I was amazed by was like, there was like one color of people over in northern Uganda. Like there was just some Black people. There wasn't no caramel. There was no milk chocolate. There was no high yellow. There was no red bone. There was no. And then there was me. And it was, we were, and everywhere we went, we were always greeted with peace. I was like, you know what? In back home, when somebody says, you know, the peace of the Lord be on you, they mean, man, I hope you get a good night's sleep.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
But these people, when they're saying, hey, made a piece of, they're like, I'm not here to kill you, and I hope you're not here to kill me.
Hmm.
And that was like next level stuff for me. When I went there and I had a meal with some South Sudanese refugees, and it was an okra, what they called an okra stew.
Hmm.
And they had this rice paper. It was basically like they mashed down rice into a thin paper that was like toilet paper in a bowl, and you would pick up a piece, you peel it off, and you drop it right in the middle. But it was basically just rice.
Hmm.
And then they had this spicy paste from this little pepper that was like a local pepper, and you put that in there as well. And I'm eating it, and Kevin, I kid you not, I'm from New Orleans. I'm from the Big Easy, right? We do food here in this neck of the
Yes.
woods.
Yes, you all do.
When I ate that meal, I went, oh my, this is okra gumbo. This is the African roots of the
And
cuisine that I've grown up with, never thinking that what I'm eating comes from the legacy of people being brought to America from the continent of Africa, sharing their cuisine and their culture that then becomes mainstreamed and a part of this international city, New Orleans, and its cuisine. And it was just this really beautiful moment where I was like, man, I kind of appreciate my city a little bit more.
Mhm.
It took me going all the way to East Africa to appreciate where I
You,
live on a
you
regular
didn't
basis.
you didn't blame New Orleans for cultural appropriation?
No, I didn't do that.
Okay.
But I won some brownie points being as pale as I
Mhm.
am by the chief because I handled
The
their
spices.
pepper.
Right.
Yeah. And he was like, man, never seen a white man handle his peppers like that. I'm like, hey, I'm not your average white guy.
Right.
Yeah. But no, you're right. Daryl Evans. You know Daryl Evans?
Mm-mm.
He's the rhythm and blues player that's like converted like 200 Ku Klux Klansmen out of the Klan.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah. I know
He
you're
said the
talking.
same thing. He grew up for the first 10 years of his life. His parents worked for the State Department. They went around the world,
Mhm.
and it took him being almost 10 years old coming back to the United States before he was in rooms that were either all black or all white. But he lived in places all over the world, Japan and different
Mhm.
parts of Asia. And it was always different types of people, and they never had the issues that it took him to come back home and realize existed.
Right, but
So
I mean that's
travel.
but that's like the soldiers for World War I and World War II. You
Yep.
know, they travel overseas, fight for this country, come back, and you get hanged in your uniform. It's like, hey, what,
Right.
you know, um,
Right.
I remember having a conversation with this guy one night, and he was saying to me, the country needs to get back to the good old days. And I said, when was that? And he was like, right after World War II, when this country was really thriving. And I said, it was good for some people. It wasn't good for
Right.
all. Okay. When you're getting hanged in your uniform, or you can't get your VA benefits or your GI Bill, or people are turning hoses and dogs on you, or you're being told to get out of this town before the sun goes down, that's not a good way to live.
That's 100% true.
And I mean, and what people don't understand, there's still sundown towns. Okay. There's sundown towns in the state of Maryland still. Okay. There are parts of Maryland.
Texas,
Yeah. Yeah. There are parts of
Central
Maryland.
Louisiana,
Yeah. You better not be around here when the sun goes down.
most of Mississippi.
I know. I know. But I turned to my wife one day and I was asking her about buying property in Mississippi. She was like, if you want a divorce, just say you don't want to be married anymore. Don't ask
Right.
me to move. Don't ask me to move to Mississippi.
Right. No, it's amazing how they're a little they're a little hard to keep up. They don't seem to keep up with the group very easily.
No, no, no. I mean, there are some unique individuals in Mississippi.
For sure.
I've been in Stennis and I've been in Biloxi, and there are some unique individuals in both places.
No doubt. I
Yeah.
know we travel at least once a year straight up 55 in Mississippi to Memphis from New Orleans. And so we hit Grenada rather. And once you get pretty close to Memphis, you get to South Memphis and all that. it gets real poor. It gets a little less rural, but in those places, you pull over to some kind of like little rest stop along the way between like Poplarville and like Jackson, Mississippi, and it's like, man, I'm a little nervous coming into some of those places.
Yeah.
It very much sounds like, boy, you're not from around here, you know.
And you need to go soon.
I'm just here for a stick of gum and a bathroom break, and I'm gone.
Yeah, because I know my father-in-law told me a story when he was in South Carolina, and this was in the '60s, and he's from California, and they came out east for something. And they were driving down the side, and he said we were on the highway, and we then stopped to use the bathroom at a gas station, and went in, to get the key to the restroom. You can't have this key. you can't have this key. He was like, I ended up peeing in a cornfield somewhere. Yeah.
In college, we're playing Tougaloo College outside of Jackson, Mississippi. Outside of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And there was this little catfish, all you can eat catfish joint, and game was late. We had our bus was the women's team and the men's team. And my coach says, "Hey, go run inside and see if they're still open and if they'll service." I said, "All right." So I go. I say, "Hey, it's a team of about 60 people on the bus. We're from New Orleans. We just finished playing. Oh yeah, no problem. Come on in. Well, of course, everybody else who gets off the bus doesn't look like me. Right. And by the time we get in there, oh, sorry, we're closed. So needless to say, my head coach was like, "Trey, you don't get to go in and ask anybody for service anymore."
No more.
I remember we were playing HBU. We were playing Houston Baptist University in Houston. And my teammate had just hit a three from the top of the key. And the baseline official put his finger down. Instead of giving the sign of like a three-pointer, he put his finger down and pointed that it was a two. And the official close to him, because they run a three-man team, the official close to him had marked it as a three and then marked it as a good bucket. So the referees, they call themselves timeout, and the three officials come together, and immediately the coaches pull their teams over because it's an official timeout. They want to take advantage of it. And as I'm walking past the officials, I hear, and all three of the officials are white officials, I hear the officials say, "We can't let these ends win." And I heard that, and I start screaming at my coach. I'm like, "Coach, he just said," and I repeated it. And he pulled me over, and he comes over and he goes, "If you don't shut your mouth." And I'm like, "Coach, he just called us ends.
Yeah, we gotta get out of here now."
And he goes, "Shut your damn mouth." And I didn't understand it at the time. There was still game to be played, and we're trying to get out of there with a victory. And we were better than them at the time, so we ended up winning the game, not by much, but there were lessons like that learned when I was in college, where I got to experience a lot of stuff firsthand. So there's never going to be better than the experiences that I've had, and there's several other ones. I remember I was driving back from my coach's mother's funeral. I went and I took a couple of other people. We went up there. We paid our respects when his mom died. On the way back through Louisiana, we were trying to get back because there was one of the passengers was the head coach of Dillard University, and he had a game that night. So man, I'm trucking, and we get pulled over by a little local yokel in St. Francisville. Well, I used to oftentimes go in a tanning bed because playing basketball wearing a tank top, I like to increase my tan a little bit so I don't look quite so pale on the court. So I get out, and I've always had a bald head. After we did a team unity thing, rocked a bald head and just kept it shaved since. And so I get out the car, and he says, he's looking at my driver's license, and he's looking at me, and he's looking inside the car, and he says, "What's your race?" And what's my race? I'm like, what is that? Man, I'm white. And he just kind of looked at me, just kept writing a ticket and kind of giving me a little side eye and I'm like, man, this is some stuff here. And things like that, those experiences have let me know that there's still prejudice, there's still racism. I'm never gonna be a fool and say, "Oh, it doesn't exist." And but I can pretty much, as a student of history, I can look at things and I can know for pretty much for certain, Kevin, you wouldn't trade being who you are in 2021 for any time 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 years ago in the same country.
No,
We've made some progress. Let me ask you a question. Why do you think it's so hard for us to admit, both blacks and whites? Why is it so hard for us to admit that things are better today than they were 2, 3 decades ago, 4 or 5 decades ago? Has there not been progress?
I don't think that it's an issue of folks not saying that there's progress. I think that everybody sees and believes that there's progress. Even as you mentioned with the black president, having a black president. So I think that folks see progress. But I also think that folks still see some of the same BS that's been going on always. And it hasn't changed. That hasn't gotten better. Excuse me. Those things haven't gotten better.
Like what would be an example of that?
When like stop and frisk, people making assumptions about people and you don't even know them. You don't know anything about them. When you assume that because I have a nice car that I'm a drug dealer, just because I'm driving a Mercedes and I could be 22 years old, or or you make the assumption, oh, I must be an athlete. No, maybe I got an IT certification, I've got a CCIE in Cisco, and I'm making $200,000 a year at 22 years old. Okay. I could probably buy you several times over. Okay. But that's not what I'm doing. And I always wanted a Mercedes, so I bought one.
Do you think that that's always a case? Like that sort of proactive policing? If you're a police officer
I was a military police officer, so I have some similar.
Okay, so like not all profiling is necessarily racial profiling, and even racial profiling in terms of high crime rates. Like if I go to East St. Louis, I'm not looking for white women committing murders.
Okay.
That's just kind of like a common sense policing.
But if I'm in, East Jablip, Kentucky, okay, I'm just because you're driving a brand new Ford F-150, I'm not pulling you over saying, where'd you get this F-150 from? Okay,
well, maybe they are. Hold on, wait, hold on. But we don't know. Maybe they are. But see, that don't fit the narrative. Neither the white cop nor the white redneck that's getting pulled over in South Bliptown, Kentucky, is being put forth in a national narrative as an oppressed people group.
But when you've been oppressed, okay, first of all, you have to start with being oppressed, okay? And have you ever completely taken, your foot off someone's neck, back, whatever? And the answer to that question is no. Yes, things have got.
Who hasn't?
Society, this country, it has not done that. Because one, okay, so Trey, if you and your wife get into an argument, somebody at some point is going to break that silence or whatever, or is going to de-escalate or whatever. And you're going to
apologize first.
Right. Or you're going to say, I did X, Y, and Z wrong, or this wasn't right. And what can I do to make it better? That has never happened in this country. And when we start talking about things like critical race theory, or we start talking about things like atonement and those kinds of, the country itself has never said, you know what, Black folks, we screwed up. We took full advantage of you as a labor force, as nannies, whatever it is we needed you for, that's what we did. We've stolen some of your knowledge and put our names on it and kept it moving, gotten rich, and we have not apologized. Some folks will say there's no need to apologize. You'll have other folks that will say that, well, I didn't do that to you, so why should I have to apologize? You'll have, that was just my ancestors. Oh, don't worry about it. And so rather than just like we were talking about with back to the very beginning with Kwame and Stephen Jackson, if Stephen Jackson would just say, Kwame, you know what? That was not cool what I did. I sincerely apologize. We were teammates. We were whatever. We were in the league. And I understand your point. And you know what? Bro, I never thought about it from that perspective. 12 years in the league, 60 some odd $1 million. Put your mama in a house at 18. Nah, bro, you're not a bust. You still got money. You still got land. You're not asking nobody for anything. You're not down here at the local Home Depot working or at the local Walmart working to try to make ends meet for your family. And if you do, it's because you want to, not because you have to. Okay.
Kevin, see, I agree with you. That works on a micro level. But
right.
How does that look? How does that look on a macro level? Are we angling for reparations? Are we talking about financial restitution?
I don't think that I'm a firm believer in reparations. However, after what I saw last January, Black folks, if you want reparations, you can forget it. Because if you got white folks in Congress and Black folks in Congress arguing over giving people $1,400, $2,000, whatever, okay? If they argue
no $150,000,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Don't look for no 40 acres and no mule and a Cadillac and 100 grand dropped into your bank account. That's not happening. You got people arguing over $2,000. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's difficult from a practical level. Like, does Barack Obama get a check or does he cut a check?
Does LeBron James get a check or cut a check? What I mean by that is,
if both his parents are found to be descendants of slaves, well, then he gets a check regardless of how much he's worth.
You're saying because of
I don't mean
Barack Obama's interracial.
I'm saying his mom was white, his dad is not American.
It doesn't. He would get a check. Just so you know, he would get a check. And the reason why is
about Kamala.
She's not American. Anyway, I'm just joking, Madam President.
That's Kevin. We are not kicking off a birther movement, a new birther movement here on Kevin's show.
Yeah, we'll start a new one. I'll be the Black Donald Trump. There we go. But I'm not getting no toupee and no plugs put in. I'm gonna just rock the ball head.
That's right.
But no, I think that part of the problem is that folks don't want to look at this country without rose-colored tints. So like you'll have like Trump touting out "Make America Great Again." When was the last time America was number one? You know what I'm saying? We're not number one in math. We're not number one in science. We're not,
right.
We don't have the number one economy. We got number one. Yeah, most people in jail, in the world. So, when do we address or at least admit that there was some wrongdoing, or not some, that there was wrongdoing? Okay. If somebody were to come into Louisiana and snatch up you and your family and send you to Canada and send them to Guatemala, you're not going to be a happy camper.
Okay? I don't know anyone who doesn't acknowledge the atrocities within American history, and this coming from a former American history teacher. I don't see it in textbooks.
No.
I don't see it in people. And when you hear about going back to make, for instance, under Ronald Reagan, his quote was "Make America Great." So Trump is not that clever. His campaign is not that clever, right? Well, let's make it great again. Okay. So yes, if you want to know when he's referring to that, we're going to make it like, people who ascribe to the MAGA way of thinking about things, from my experience, are just talking about not a specific time in an actual historical timeline, as much as it's a be number one in things again, manufacturing, economy, military, leadership, not,
Right. But
hey, let's go back to the 1950s where black people had to pay poll taxes to vote.
but the only way to do that, and I think that you will agree with this, is that you have to invest in the people. And we don't invest in the people. We invest in trying to indoctrinate people, but we don't invest in people and their skills. So once again, we go back to Kwame, and we start talking about trade schools. We start talking about information technology. We start talking about, the phonics and reading and helping kids learn how to read. We start talking about,
But Kevin, that's as a small government conservative, you're making my argument right now. Like, government has gotten to a point, at least federally. In 2011, I ran for governor here in Louisiana. I ran against Bobby Jindal. I ran as a Christian, conservative, pro-life, Tea Party Democrat. When I went to places that if I'd ran as a Republican or as an independent, I'd have never got into many of the black churches that I went and spoke at. I'd have never got into some of the places that I was able to get into simply because I had a D. And the fact that I was willing to say, hey, I'm a Christian and I'm a Democrat. Because when I went to those places, I didn't throw around all the extra, the three middle ones. I'm a Christian Democrat running against Bobby Jindal. And the support that I finished 4th out of 11. But the support that I saw from someone who was willing to wear a title, if you will, that for the most part, it seems like remember when the Democratic National Committee voted to keep God out of their party platform? They booed God at the National Convention. These were people who embraced, thank you for finally being a Christian who is also a Democrat. I grew up in a family of Democrats. I don't think government, if my community, which I don't identify with, was in the condition, if I lived in West Virginia and my community was the type of white poverty that you see in West Virginia, I would not be looking for the federal government to come and government is not coming to rescue any of us.
And I don't think that inner city folks do that. I don't think they're looking for the government to come save them. I think that they're looking for supplements, yes, but to come save them. But if I'm poor,
I see the Democrat Party as Uncle Sam's plantation. I see the Democrat Party as enslaving generations since the 1960s onto the welfare state. I see the welfare state created by liberal Democrats. I ascribe to Shelby Steele's assessment that after 67, when finally Black people were equal under the law, there was never a time given to Black people in America who live under the burden of freedom and equality. Immediately, the Democrat Party rushed out to give womb to the tomb aid to try and make up for years of atrocities that they themselves had perpetrated against the very same community. And instead, what they did was they have taken the last 60 years and destroyed the progress made for 100 years after slavery.
But what's the difference between that and going and blowing up a country during a war and then taking your resources and going and fixing it? Taking your money and you're talking about the same thing. If they destroyed it, okay, yeah. they destroyed Black folks or put policies and things in place or hampered them from getting ahead. And now we want to hand. Here's your goodie bag because we signed this bill.
Which is why I couldn't understand why Barack Obama doubled down on Bush policies with drone strikes and unauthorized wars. And yet Trump comes in And Trump doesn't start any new wars. He doesn't start any, we don't go bomb no place.
But he's got other issues. That's just it. He's got other issues.
I'm just saying in this one, you brought up war as a good example. And I had a problem with Bush. I had more of a problem with Obama because he doubled down. And then I'm looking around going, liberals should love this. This guy's anti-war. He got no credit for that. And look, and what do we see already in less than 6 months? Here's Biden bombing Syria. For what? Leaving Afghanistan and leaving what 20 years, not leaving it strategically, just literally
should have never been there.
Get out. I agree.
Should have never been there. So now all that. Now, remember when you were talking about the Congressional Black Congress, you were talking about the opioids and the heroin in the neighborhood. You know, the #1 heroin producer is in Afghanistan.
Poppy fields. Yeah, I know. I've seen the documentaries of our military people guarding poppy fields.
Right. The president's brother is the #1 drug dealer in Afghanistan. Okay. So we're opening things back up to him. You know, the Taliban was there, not saying that they were great, but drugs weren't free. Heroin wasn't free flowing out of Afghanistan.
Yeah. No,
now it's free flowing again. Okay. But there was something that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to ask you about, because I've always had this question. You said that when you were running for governor, part of your agenda was pro-life.
Yeah.
I hear pro-life, I hear anti-abortion, but my question to people who are pro-life is, what about the child after they're born? We don't have the resources and I mean, don't get me wrong, you want this kid to be born, that's fine, but there aren't resources and things in place to make sure that this kid is a productive member of society.
Right.
Okay. So to me, when you say pro-life, that's part of, or should be part of pro-life, because we're talking about not just being born. When I say life, you and I are living right now. We have, we're living our life. So I think that goes on from the time they come out of that womb to they're dead. What are we doing to support these children?
So, it's kind of like the discussion we had around school choice. Obviously, but different. If I had to guess, I don't know, but if I had to guess, I don't think you've ever waited around for some supplement or some program to come along and help you to raise your children. Neither have I. And so there's a little bit of a conflation in
any of that I've applied for have been turned down, but go ahead.
Fair enough. If someone is in a position that goes and is trying to get an abortion, and their primary reason for getting the abortion is because they're poor or they're hooked on drugs, whatever the case may be,
or they're using abortion as a form of birth control.
Or birth control. I can tell you that 70 million more Black people in America today since 1972 might be helpful to the Black cause. I view my primary reason for being pro-life is because I think you and I, in my entire lifetime, we're living through a Black genocide through abortion. 70% of all Planned Parenthoods are placed in Black and brown neighborhoods. And if you go back to the origins of a group like Planned Parenthood, the Birth Control League of America, this was founded by people like Margaret Sanger and the eugenics movement.
Exactly.
It was the Black Panthers in the 1960s that called abortion. It was Jesse Jackson that actually called abortion Black genocide.
Well, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter said the most dangerous place for a Black child is in the mother's womb.
Alveda King, I've interviewed her before. She's been in our church. I love Alveda. So part of, I don't understand why in some circles I'm deemed racist, and I want more Black people. I want more and easier access for law-abiding citizens in inner cities to be able to defend themselves in their homes. So I want the restrictive gun laws relaxed in the inner cities across the United States so that law-abiding citizens, like, I'm tired of us catering to the criminals.
Mm-hmm.
I want to encourage law-abiding citizens to exercise all of their rights, not just the First Amendment, but including the Second Amendment. There's a great documentary called No Guns for Negroes. And it explains that, again, who are the people trying to prevent law-abiding Black people from having guns for the purpose of defending themselves? And it is liberal Democrats. The same people who are running and controlling the inner cities across America, liberal Democrats. The people who police the neighborhoods unsuccessfully, liberal Democrats.
Well, we're
of all hues.
Just real quick, where are neighborhoods being policed successfully?
In places where there's not crime.
No, in places where there's not crime, that's because there's jobs, there's opportunities. If you don't have any jobs and I can't go to work anywhere, and like you were talking about being uneducated.
Obviously, a high crime area is going to be economically depressing.
Exactly. So, in a low crime area,
but it's a chicken or an egg thing.
And a low crime area is going to be economically thriving.
So this goes back to when you have people who are generationally being supported. We have a surplus in this country right now of 4 million jobs that cannot be filled because
you got more than that. You got more than that. Yeah, you got more than that.
Because people coming through the pandemic, people are able to stay home and to sniff out a low level of living, but still compared to going out and killing yourself at a minimum wage job.
But by the same token, once again, we talked about investing in people. So if you got
government can't invest, so that's a talking point.
States and local governments can invest.
No government can invest, and here's why: because no government has money of their own, lest they take it from you and I.
And
so it's a payment. It's a payment.
But hear me out. Hear me out.
It's a scheme.